It's that time of year again. Longer, warmer days, t-shirts, tee times, and tennis rackets. Yes, most call it spring, but I call it tennis elbow season. Hi, this is Alan Willett from Tennis Elbow Classroom with a heads up about what to watch out for and what to do if you start feeling certain telltale signs. Yes, it's true that you or almost anyone could develop tennis or golfer's elbow at any time, whether you play tennis or golf or not, but there is a certain time of year, especially in the colder climates, where many people get back out on the tennis courts and golf courses and start swinging, volleying, chipping, and driving, and gardening, paddling, pitching, maybe even playing lacrosse. Doing all sorts of things. The problem is we often don't maintain our fitness conditioning while slogging through those winter doldrums. Under the spell of spring fever, enthusiasm just surges, and with all that pent-up energy and desire to be outside playing again, can be kind of a dangerous combination. It catches countless golfers and tennis players and other enthusiasts by surprise. It's so easy to overdo it and fail to allow our bodies time to regain their conditioning and to dismiss those little nagging signs that may herald the onset of an injury. Just keep playing. Hence, tennis elbow season. Of course, this tendency to overdo it and dismiss the early warning signs can apply to anyone at any time. So stay tuned regardless of whether you play tennis or golf. And just the same as I record this in early March, a surge of injuries are just about to make their first signs apparent to tens of thousands of golfers and tennis players. So here's what to watch out for. In the very beginning, the distant early warning signs are often muscular, such as, periodic forearm muscle tension, muscular fatigue and soreness. And at first, these symptoms often occur only after playing tennis or golf. And they're often experienced just first thing in the morning, and they tend to dissipate quickly within a day or even by the middle of the same day. And these symptoms may not be easily distinguishable from normal delayed onset muscle soreness at first. The kind of soreness you get normally, that you can normally expect after a hard workout, except that these symptoms tend to be more localized, just to the forearm area. And, rather than a kind of a more general little here, little there kind of soreness. And it starts lasting longer than what you'd normally expect as the problem progresses, of course. Now, I should point out that although some cases of golfers and tennis elbows seem to appear suddenly, without warning, just out of the blue, with alarming pain, sometimes even in the middle of a round or a set, most of the time these injuries creep up on us with pain and other symptoms that they escalate gradually, over weeks or months, giving us time and opportunity to do something about it, because the vast majority of these injuries involve a gradual breakdown process, not a single sudden acute injury event. Now, next comes the early warning signs, and that often means the same kind of muscle tension and soreness and fatigue we just described, but with additional soreness or tenderness at the outside of the elbow. In the case of tennis elbow, right there, this bony knob called the lateral epicondyle, to get technical, or tenderness or soreness on the inside of the elbow, in this area, with golfer's elbow, near the bony knob called the medial epicondyle, once again to get technical. And again, in the early stages, these symptoms often occur only after playing or otherwise exerting oneself, and they're usually first thing in the morning. And they often dissipate within a day or so. And these symptoms often don't show up every time you play or do your activity. They're often sporadic, and they might even seem kind of random. And next, we come to the intermediate signs. Now we're talking about sudden sharp pains when gripping, twisting, and picking up everyday objects and performing routine tasks like opening doors, shifting gears. Or it's a kind of persistent or maybe even a constant burning pain, especially if it's in your tendons. It's less serious if the pain is in your muscles here. It's more serious if it's right in your tendons, either here on the tennis elbow side or here on the golfer's elbow side, just this very small area. And at some point, if these symptoms start happening when you're playing or exerting yourself moderately, or if they persist for several days or more, you're crossing the line from warning, sharp curve ahead, to too late, you've already slid off the road. At the point when these symptoms have been more present than not for 6 weeks or they've been on and off for 3 months or so, just in a general sense, it's considered chronic and will probably be classified as an injury, whether tennis or golfer's elbow. Now, I just want to point out that none of this is really definitive. These are only general guidelines. Some problems give you little warning, and some give you a lot of warning before becoming a full-blown injury. And once again, even if your pain did appear suddenly, with harsh severity, and you never got much of a warning, that doesn't necessarily mean your injury happened all at once. Sometimes the injury process happens quietly with little or no symptoms at first. And with tennis elbow, you do tend to get more of a warning. With golfer's elbow, you tend to get less of one. So now the question becomes, how seriously should you take it? How concerned should you be if you're starting to experience some of these early warning signs? I'm going to say be fairly concerned. For every golf or tennis playing injury sufferer who casually claims, they never did anything beyond swallowing a few anti-inflammatories or slapping a cold pack on their elbow after playing, nothing came of it, apparently. There are two more who didn't think it was anything to take seriously at first, and they did the same thing. They didn't realize their mistake until months later when their injury was stubbornly resisting treatment and getting worse. Worst of all, keeping them off the green or the court, or maybe off the river, unable to paddle their kayak, which is my newfound passion. In fact, as someone who's been specializing in treating golfers and tennis elbow for over a decade, I've heard a lot of stories about how people's injuries came about, and I'd recommend taking any warning signs, pretty seriously. For example, you may be wondering, why be all that concerned if I'm only having mild symptoms, come and go, and only last for short periods? One reason is that you can't really be absolutely sure exactly what those symptoms mean. Yes, generally your symptoms will tend to be milder and more intermittent, come and go in the earlier stages, and conversely be more intense and persistent as the injury worsens. But that's not a hard, fast rule. Well, hopefully when you first start to notice the telltale aches and twinges, it's just the early warning signs that you're at risk of an injury soon. But again, by the time you start to experience symptoms, you may already have an injury underway, although hopefully it's a mild one in its early stages. Either way, the most important thing is to take your tension, soreness, your achiness, or outright pain seriously and not to assume, it's probably nothing. If you've never had a tendon injury before, you might not know any better, but the biggest reason why you want to be proactive is that these tendon injuries they're notoriously difficult to treat and recover from. Tendons heal slowly, and often they need a lot of help. And past a certain point, which you only really know once you've crossed it, you can't just expect them to recover while you're resting, hoping, and waiting. Not that a grueling, painful struggle is an absolute given. Not if you avoid the typical mistakes most tendon injury sufferers make and you take the right course right from the start. If you take the early warning message seriously and treat your problem properly, right from the start, you may catch and reverse the progression before it becomes an outright injury, which is certainly the ideal. At the very least, you can treat it early while it's still a minor problem and not a moderate to severe injury. Being proactive almost always pays off in a quicker, easier recovery. So here's what to do and what not to do. One of your first questions and considerations is probably going to be, should I stop playing and rest my arm as much as possible? Or can I keep playing tennis or golf even if I have tennis elbow? Well, the obvious intuitive course of action or non-action would be naturally to stop the activity that's caused the injury or what seems to be causing the symptoms and putting one at risk. But that may not always be necessary, in my opinion anyway, if you're careful and are at least willing to reduce how often and how long you play. This is a pretty nuanced issue though, and I'm going to refer you to my article or video or podcast episode, whichever one you prefer, for a detailed answer on this question of whether it's safe to continue playing. There should be a link to that under this video if you're on my YouTube channel or my article at Tennis Level Classroom. Now we come to the question of treatment, where I completely diverge from almost all the conventional wisdom on the subject. Not because I enjoy being a total contrarian, maybe I do a little bit anyway, but because the conventional wisdom is simply wrong. The standard medical approach and common wisdom tends to blame inflammation for the problem incorrectly and takes an approach that's best summarized as immobilize, cool, and suppress, meaning to immobilize the area with a brace, cool it with ice, and suppress inflammation with pills and sometimes cortisone shots. This is a huge treatment strategy error, which I can't explain all in great detail, the detail it deserves right now. So just to give you the big picture, What I recommend instead is that most tennis and golfer's elbow sufferers follow a mobilize, warm, and allow approach. In other words, to mobilize the muscles and tendons involved gently instead of immobilizing them with a brace, to warm the area, to stimulate blood flow and allow whatever inflammatory process is going on to do what it's there to do, which is part of the healing process. So no cooling, inhibiting, suppressing ice, anti-inflammatory pills, or cortisone shots. I understand it may be difficult to accept that, which is why I have so many articles and videos devoted to the topic of what not to do to treat your tennis or golfer's elbow. So please visit tenniselbowclassroom.com if you're not already here for all the articles and videos going into detail about why the standard treatments are not in your best interest, if your primary goal is healing and not just temporary pain relief anyway. Some of these mistakes are relatively benign, like icing a little here and there, which may slow healing somewhat. Unfortunately, some have the potential to completely alter the course of your recovery for the worst, cortisone shots being the absolute worst offender. Even wearing a brace around all day and resting the area, by trying to move it and use it as little as possible, can have adverse effects that, while making you feel better in the short term, may prolong your recovery in the long run. Okay, so what's the right way to treat golfers and tennis elbow then? As I said earlier, I recommend that most tennis and golfer's elbow sufferers mobilize the muscles and tendons involved instead of immobilizing them. I believe that stretching and exercises are an important part of the rehab process, and sometimes the right stretches and exercises can just, nip it in the bud before it becomes a full-blown injury. If one catches it in time, at the first early warning signs or in the very early stages at least. But past a certain point in the injury process, stretches and exercises alone, they may not be enough. And I believe the most important tools in the box when it comes to breaking that vicious injury cycle are very specific hands-on advanced massage therapy techniques. I haven't seen or heard so far of a better way to release the muscular tension, the scar tissue in the muscles and tendons involved in tennis and golfer's elbow. That tension, that scar tissue stuckness and stagnation, it's the rot at the root of the injury. And once it's established, it tends to stubbornly resist healing. The inconvenient fact is that it often doesn't just go away, no matter how long we play the resting, hoping, and waiting game. Now, sure, you can go to a professional like myself that specializes in this kind of therapy. My practice is in Marin County in the San Francisco area, if you happen to need me and live around here. However, it's also entirely possible, and it's very practical, to learn these techniques and use them on yourself, in addition to stretches and exercises, of course. That's what I teach my students here in the Tennis Elbow Classroom members area. And if you don't think you need that much help yet, at least consider changing your treatment strategy by dropping the pills, ice brace. Start mobilizing your muscles and tendons with some basic massage. See how that goes. Maybe even try a little heat. If you're not sure whether you even have tennis or golfer's elbow, you want to do some self-assessment tests, you simply need to understand these injuries better, I have a new video course called Tennis Elbow 101 you can subscribe to for free. And I'll put a link to that in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you already have a really stubborn, full-blown case of tennis or golfer's elbow, check out my programs and consider joining to learn some better tools for your self-help toolbox. I have self-help programs for both tennis and golfer's elbow. Just follow the link if you see one below this video or podcast player, or just search for or type in tenniselbowclassroom.com to learn more. This is Alan Willett, your tennis elbow tutor, and I wish you a great season doing whatever it is you love, hopefully strong and pain-free.